excited about today's topic. It's the timing, I think, is right. We're all aware of the housing crisis in the area, statewide. And we're here to talk about, we are in the midst of, you may or may not have known it, we're in the midst of Affordable Housing Week. And I'm happy to have with us this morning for discussion on housing, Margot Ernst, who is the city's affordable housing, or not affordable, just the housing program manager. Though perhaps a lot of your time is spent dedicated to affordable. But the housing program manager is here, as well as a partner that we've had in the community, the East Bay, Habitat for Humanity East Bay, Silicon Valley. Hamid Taib and Michelle Choi are here to discuss approaches they've taken here in our community, how they've worked with the city, leveraged dollars to make projects that go, affordable projects, reality here. And they've done a couple of notable projects here in our town. They're currently undertaking one at 1250 Liswitas Way, north end of town here. I just want to start off, as always, welcoming you, but then also a couple of highlights. Again, as I mentioned, it's Affordable Housing Week, and we do have a nice discussion ahead of us. I know we're starting a couple minutes early. That's fine. I'll remind you there are donuts in the back. But also, feel free anytime if you need to step out the restrooms and know where everything is. I'm going to stop there. I think we'll just get right into it. I'd like to bring up and welcome Margot Ernst, again, our housing program manager here for the city of Walnut Creek. And she has a presentation for you about the housing density bonus here in Walnut Creek, one of the tools available at your disposal for both market rate and affordable developers. Without further ado, Margot, please take it away. Please.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Margot.
Is this the right height thing? It's very heavy for the stand. Okay, I want to just take a quick read of the room to see what the level of familiarity is with the state density bonus law. So I know on the agenda it says Walnut Creek density bonus. The state density bonus law requires that cities adopt a density bonus law ordinance in their own jurisdictions that is in compliance with the state law. And of course, we have the flexibility to go further than state law, but we need to have that ordinance, and we do have one. But a lot of today, what I'm going to talk about is the state law, because there have been a lot of changes, and most recently there were 4 bills passed that became effective in January 2017. So our ordinance is now kind of behind some of the changes to law. So we would reference in that case the state law. So I'm going to be focusing mostly on that and talking about our ordinance where we might have some additional incentives. But to take a quick read, I'm just going to see by a show of hands who in the room would, just raise your hand if you are not at all familiar with density bonus law. Okay. And if you would consider yourself just a little bit familiar. Okay, good. And moderately familiar. And you would consider yourself an expert.
It's good that our presenters.
So my first thing that I want to say before I start is that I'm actually not an expert in the state density bonus law, and I am certainly not in all of the legal nuances. So I oftentimes, as I'm working through stuff, or if I'm trying to figure out the requirements for a particular situation, I will oftentimes consult with our city attorney's office. And so I'm giving that caveat, but I'm excited to be here to share with you what I know about it and my understanding and interpretation of how it applies and how it would apply in Walnut Creek. So in Walnut Creek, we've actually used density bonus only for affordable projects. So in the time that I've been here, no market rate developer has utilized this tool. But you'll see as we go through that it's a great opportunity for market rate developers to be able to get to where you are wanting to go with your project, and for us to be able to get the affordability that we so desperately need. So I've done many presentations on the housing crisis, and if you want to talk to me about that, I'm happy to do that. But tonight I'm not going to go into any of that. I just want to really jump right in to density bonus. And I think this works better. Sorry, 1 second. So the types of projects that are eligible, I'm going to start first with residential. Residential development projects that are providing 5% affordable to very low income households. Residential development projects that are providing 10% affordable to lower income. So very low income is 50% of area median income and below. Lower income would go all the way up to 80% of area median income. 10% affordable to moderate income. This is for sale projects only, and that goes up to 120% of area median income. And this is new. This is one of the new additions in 2017, that there's an additional bonus that you can get if you have 10% that are designated for transitional foster youth, disabled vets, veterans, or the homeless, and they're affordable to very. So those would all be very low income category, and that's an additional bonus that you can get. Senior housing developments that are more than 35 units are eligible. There's no affordability requirement in those. Condominium conversions are eligible if they are providing a certain percent of affordability. Residential development projects that are willing to donate land. So I'm not going to go into all of the specifics on this. The land donation is a little bit complicated and has some pretty strict criteria, but if that's something that is an option for you, we can talk through it. But there is an option for a land donation. And the land donation is specifically for developing housing that is affordable to very low income. And if a residential development project provides the affordability noted up above, and also an on-site child care center, they can qualify for an additional bonus with that. So those are what makes a project eligible on the residential side. And what that makes you eligible for is a density bonus that can go, it ranges between 20% and the maximum would be 35%. Density bonus, you can get between 1 and 3 incentives or concessions depending on how much affordability you're providing. You can get waivers or reductions in site development standards. That's on top of the incentives and concessions. And you can get an automatic parking reduction. And are there any commercial developers here? Or is it all residential? Commercial. So commercial development projects can also qualify for bonuses under the density bonus program. And they would qualify if they were willing to construct affordable units, either on-site or in the near proximity. There's some specific criteria for that. Or if you partner with a nonprofit housing developer. And partnering with a nonprofit housing developer could mean land donation, which also has specific criteria, as I noted, or donation of funds for affordable housing. And in that partnership, there needs to be 33% affordable to low income or 15% affordable to very low income. And what you can get for that, you get certain you can qualify for certain development bonuses. It's different than the residential side, which has a required fixed percent of density bonus and a specific number of concessions. On the commercial side, it's something that is negotiated between the commercial developer and the city. So it's a mutually agreed upon set of concessions. And it may include an increase in the maximum allowable intensity on the site, an increase in the maximum allowable floor area ratio, an increase in the maximum height requirements, reduction in minimum parking requirement, an exception to a zoning ordinance or other land use regulation, and it's not limited to just these, but those are examples. So this is a chart that shows, I'm going to just sort of talk through it. So the first column is the different kind of affordability categories. So very low income, lower income, moderate income, the senior housing, which has no affordable criteria. The CC stands for condominium conversion. So there's 2 categories. One, if you're making affordable to moderate, 1 lower, and so on and so forth. And the minimum percent requirement and what bonus you get for that minimum percent requirement. So the middle column is the minimum bonus basically that you would get. The last column is the percent requirement of affordability for those categories in order to get the maximum 35% density bonus. So, for example, if you're for very low income, if you provide up to 11%, you can get the maximum 35% versus 5% where it's 20. Then there's a whole range in between there. So you can provide 6%, 7%, 8%, and get a relative increase. So I'll just give you a second to absorb it. Yeah.
Just noting for everybody, we will send out this presentation. So if you're trying to scribble numbers, we will save you from that.
So a couple other important requirements to note is there is a replacement housing requirement. So if your project involves the demolition or removal of units that are either have rents that are affordable to low income, so that could be because they're subsidized or rent restricted, or it could just be the natural market rent is considered affordable. It falls in the affordable range. That's kind of unlikely right now, but it can happen at different times in the market. Or if they're occupied, regardless of the rent, if it's occupied by somebody who is very low income or low income, then it must be replaced, and the replacement requirement is 1 for 1. So this replacement requirement is if you want to be eligible for the density bonus in this scenario. So that's an important thing to note. Yes.
So you say households. So is it the household aggregate income?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's the household aggregate income. So anybody over 18 in the household who's earning income would be counted. Another thing that's important and may seem insignificant, but it can at times be significant, is that everything in the density bonus ordinance is rounded up. So that includes the base density calculation, the calculation for the required affordable units, and just to note, the required affordable units is based only on the base density. So if your maximum base density is 100, you calculate and you're doing 10%, that'd be 10 units. Then on top of that, you get the bonus units, which are not then subject to the affordable criteria under the density bonus law. But the required affordable units is rounded up. Doesn't matter if it results in 10.1 units, it's rounded up to 11, whatever it is. The number of density bonus units you get is also rounded up. So everything is rounded up. This can be significant, or it can make a difference in determining particularly the base density, because for the city, a non-density bonus project, we would round down for maximum density. So it might actually make a difference in a unit on the base density that you're calculating. There's also, of course, affordability restrictions on the affordable unit. So there's a lot of other details, but just the sort of big picture overview is on the rental side, they need to be affordable for 55 years. On the for sale side, they're sold to an eligible buyer at a restricted price, and then there is an equity share between the eligible buyer and the city. So upon resale, it actually goes to market, and the city sort of absorbs the relative portion of appreciation, and has recorded already a promissory note on the difference between the restricted price and the market rate price. So for incentives and concessions, so what qualifies as an incentive or concession? A reduction in site development standards or a modification of the zoning code or design requirement. I think this is new, actually, is you can get approval of mixed-use zoning in conjunction with the housing project. So this is specifically if the non-residential uses that you're requesting are compatible with housing and other area development. Other regulatory incentive concessions that result in identifiable cost reductions to provide for the affordable housing would be eligible. And a new law clarified this. It's actually always how I interpreted it, and I think it was always the intent, but it's now clarified that you can be eligible for the incentives or concessions, the parking reductions, all of those things, even if you don't need the density bonus. So even if you're not requesting a density bonus for your project, if you're providing the affordability, you automatically become eligible for the other benefits of the ordinance. So the city there's a for the city to deny your request for the incentive or concession, we have to be able to show that it does not result in identifiable and actual cost reductions to provide for the affordable housing, causes a public health or safety problem, causes an environmental problem, harms historical property. This is obviously very brief language, or is contrary to law in some other form. And here's the number of incentives or concessions that you could be eligible for the different types of categories. So it's either 1, 2, or 3. You're eligible for 1, 2, or 3 concessions or incentives. In addition to that, a project that is a qualifying project can request waivers or reductions of development standards that physically prevent the project from being built at the permitted density. So if once you obtain that bonus, if there are other development standards that physically prohibit those bonus units from being developed, you can request waivers and reductions of those. And you can request an unlimited number of those. But they have to be tied to the physically preventing. And we could probably go on and on about what that means. And at what point is it actually a physically preventing, or can you just lower the 12-foot ceiling and be, within the standards? So that's a longer discussion. So on the parking, I didn't do this table so well in hindsight, but on the top I show the city standard. That's actually the multifamily standard for parking, the parking requirement, the very top one. The second line is the density bonus maximum. So if you are qualifying for a density bonus, the maximum parking that you can be required if you choose to request it is in 3 categories is less than what the city standard would be. The truth is this density bonus maximum also applies to single family parking requirements, which I did not include on here. And I think that is just 2 units per, somebody can tell me, is it two covered stalls? So that this density bonus maximum also applies to those. The city, the third one is we have a approximate parking standard, and the density bonus also has a standard, a lower standard that you can qualify for if you request it. It's not BART proximate, but it's being proximate to any sort of major transit. So it could include BART, it could include other types of transit, and that's also lower. In addition to this, there are a bunch of other lower parking standards if you're doing 100% affordable. And I didn't include all of those, but just so that you know that those also exist. And the law also allows that the parking can be provided through tandem or uncovered parking, but not on-street parking. So, as many of you may know, if you're a residential developer, the city also has an inclusionary housing requirement. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how the density bonus and the inclusionary ordinance work together, or what happens when you apply both of them. So the city requirements, and this is just very general, rental development projects pay a housing impact fee. You may know that cities are prohibited from requiring on-site units in rental projects because of state Costa-Hawkins rent control law, which prevents the city from setting initial rents if we don't have a contribution, some type of financial contribution into the project. For sale, 10%, this is all or, so 10% moderate, or 7% affordable to low, or 6% affordable to very low, or they can pay a fee in lieu of that. Condominium conversion projects have a 15% low income affordability requirement, or 11% very low. There are some alternatives. Off-site construction, land dedication is an alternative, important to note is there is an alternative for provision of rental inclusionary units. So rental inclusionary units in a rental project can be requested if you are utilizing the density bonus ordinance, because in density bonus, when you get a density bonus increase or a waiver of a development standard or an incentive or concession, that can qualify as a city financial contribution to your project, which then can allow the city to restrict initial rents, which allows you to request to provide on-site affordable units in your rental project. Now that can be significant for you in this regard, and this is important, and this is actually not stated, the opposite is stated in our local ordinance, because at that time, that was how it was interpreted, now it's different. So inclusionary units can qualify projects for density bonus and or concessions. So if you're providing inclusionary units, as long as they meet the criteria of the affordable units for the density bonus law, those count. So if you're going to use density bonus, you can request the provision of rental inclusionary units. If you do that, the requirement is 10% affordable to low or 7% affordable to very low, and those then count as density bonus units. So I hope that made sense to you. So what does that look like? I put together this chart. It's pretty simple, but for our requirement, I'm trying to show what, if you provide on-site units pursuant our inclusionary ordinance, I'm trying to show what that qualifies you automatically under density bonus. So if you do the 10% requirement for moderate, that is equal to the density bonus minimum. That would automatically qualify you for a 5% bonus and 1 concession, and also the parking standard reduction. So do you meet it with the inclusionary? Yes. Generally, yes. I will give a caveat that the inclusionary requirement actually applies to the whole project, not just the base project. So once you get the density bonus, that inclusionary requirement could kick up, but it might not, because our inclusionary requirement at a certain point, if it's less than 0.5 rounds down, whereas density bonus rounds up, so you may end up with the same number. For sale low, you don't quite meet it with 7% versus the required 10% on the density bonus. For sale very low, you would meet it, and you would qualify in that case for a 20% bonus, 1 concession. On the condominium conversion, it's only our ordinance only allows low income, so only in that case would you meet it, but you would by meeting our requirement. On the rental, I have it in orange because on the rental you need to request that alternative, and that has to be approved. So it's not an automatic under the ordinance, but if you request that and it's approved, you would meet it for both the low and the very low income requirement. You would be able to get automatically a 20% bonus, 1 concession, the parking standards, and so on and so forth. So I already mentioned this, but provision of rental inclusionary units requires approval. Percent requirements for inclusionary may increase. So we are actually in the process of reviewing and making recommendations for increases to our inclusionary ordinance. And they apply to the whole project. That covers what I wanted to say about density bonus. And then what I'd really like to do is have a minute to be able to talk about going beyond state density bonus. So as I noted, our density bonus ordinance is sort of behind, as all cities are. It's not just us, but we're behind the law right now because of the new bills that were passed. So we're going to be revising it, and we're motivated and interested in really exploring what other incentives can we incorporate. So we do have one other allowance in our ordinance that is not a part of state law, which says if you provide 50% of your project affordable to very low or 75% affordable to low, you can get a density bonus that goes above 35%. And it's not a specific amount, it's kind of like whatever you need and if it works, you know. But I'm really interested in hearing from this group what other types of incentives that the city could incorporate that would incentivize you as developers to build either more affordable housing, or to build housing that is more affordable by design. So if there's any comments from the group, I'm ready to hear. Or if you have any questions on the presentation, either. Okay.
Oh, I have a question. I wanted to ask kind of how the decision was made to require approval for the rental affordable units. Like, why do those need approval versus the other ones don't?
Well, we used to actually have just an automatic, you could provide the rental units, but there was a court ruling that determined it was a violation of state law because of the state Costa-Hawkins rent control provision. So we need to have the opportunity to review the request to make sure that we are not, that we're, in compliance with state law. So we have the opportunity to review it and make a determination. Yeah.
Can you explain the income levels at very low, low, and moderate?
I didn't put, there's so much information and I was like scaling it back. I didn't put that slide in and I don't know it exactly, but I'm really bad at remembering what it is. But I can say for a household of 4, I do know moderate income is about 112,000, and that's at 120% of AMI. So going down from there, I think 80% goes up to about 80 something thousand for a household of 4. And 80% is the low income. 50% is very low income, and I think that would be somewhere around 50,000 or a little more for a household of 4.
That's something you've got in.
I mean, I can we can actually add it into this if people are interested. I have a slide that tells it exactly. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
So I know you've heard from me in the past on this, but to answer your question specifically, what could the city do to help builders get there? I think a couple of the problems that I see is, height's a problem because of Measure A mostly and because of zoning limits. So there's only so much additional density, particularly if you're a for-sale developer, because your unit size is going to be large enough that you're trying to kick an extra level, and often by going an extra level up, you're now into a different building type, which causes the construction cost of your building for every square foot to go up. And if you only get one floor by doing that because of the height limits, the density bonus hasn't helped you because of the offset in the construction costs. So height limits and Measure A's, from my perspective, a big problem for developers using the density bonus in Walnut Creek. The other is the parking reduction. While it's great to say that the parking reduction is, you're eligible for the parking reduction, or that you're approximately you're eligible for the parking reduction, but for the most part, the market in Walnut Creek wants parking. I mean, people who live here aren't exclusively walking to BART or using transit. They may do that for some of their daily transportation, but they still want to have a car, most of them. And so, we're not in such a downtown tech-oriented group of folks yet that everybody is only using, they live their life off Uber. These people still have cars, they still want parking spaces when they pay $4,000 for parking, right? So, though that density bonus sounds good, in practice it's not really helping. I like the idea of being able to have the density bonus reduce certain other restrictions like the storage requirement. By having that 200 square foot storage requirement, you lose a certain density in your project. But of course it is, we have that requirement because people need storage, and it's a good marketable thing. So that's a difficult trade-off. One of the things that I think we talked about that I like that the city can offer is some kind of package of expedited plan review. There may be some kind of expedited inspection process. I guess my perspective is not just in the plan check itself, but it's in construction. A lot of what's restricting the ability to do these bigger buildings is your capital costs and how long it takes you to go from breaking ground to getting occupancy in those buildings. So if you're carrying that building for 18 months before you can get occupancy, every month at that kind of capital is really expensive. So anything the city can do through its process to try to expedite that process and guarantee that in some way that the developer can perform it, to me that's something tangible that the city can do. I also know that we have a lot of interesting planning requirements in terms of setbacks and allowing light into units and things of that nature, which I think are very positive for livability, but they do restrict density when you're trying to do an infill project. And so that's a good way to use the incentive to try to reduce that requirement But again, from a marketability point of view, that's actually a fairly helpful requirement.
Mhm.
So there's a whole package of these things that make Walnut Creek just in that little box where this law is not that helpful.
So thank you for that feedback. I know the parking is difficult, and I don't know how much of it is like when we stop building it, then the cars will stop coming. I don't know if that's like a reality or not. There are a couple of things you said: height, storage, setbacks. All of those things are eligible requests for waivers, concessions, incentives. And I understand you're saying with a couple of those that those aren't particularly helpful. So that may change over time. I mean, I think there's, you hear a lot about millennials not needing as much space, not wanting as big of places, not driving cars. So that's a trend that could continue. But thank you for the feedback. Any other questions or comments?
I was wondering, did the state law have any requirements about extremely low income applicants? I just noticed it was very low, there was no extremely low.
Yeah, they don't have a requirement for that or an allowance for that in the ordinance. A developer could do that, and the city could go beyond what state like we could, if the city wanted to, we could add that category and add our own % density bonus, and that's something we could consider. But typically, the lower the affordability, at some point it becomes a much better way to manage it is to have an affordable housing developer construct it that provides the on-site management and has the just kind of the knowledge and the experience with managing units that are really deeply subsidized. Yes.
Did you say height was a potential waiver?
It is. Height would be an eligible request for concession or incentive.
And can you give me an example of how that would work? I would come in and I'd request to go over the 50-foot height limit.
Well, you'd have to be able to. So let me see if I can go back. I know I can go back. Let me see. Yeah. Oops.
Sorry.
It's the problem with
Getting deja vu.
Yeah. So if you look at the third one, it's like you'd have to be able to show that it's an identifiable cost reduction to provide the affordable housing. But if it's required to provide the affordable housing or to provide the density bonus units under the waivers, right? If it's physically prevents, so if you're building something and it has like 11-foot ceilings and you say, well, I need another story and so I need to go above the 50-foot, we would probably work with you for design changes that would allow you to stay within the height limit because you don't need 11-foot. But if you're at, I don't know, what's typical, 7 feet, 7.5 feet for a ceiling, and you can't really go lower than that and have it be livable, and you need that extra height to make it work, then you can request that concession
But
or that waiver.
if I made the argument, in order for me to get enough revenue to provide you with affordable housing, I need an 11-foot ceiling.
I don't have an answer to that. I mean, that would be getting into an area where we would need to be working that out
Gotcha.
in the moment. Because the truth is, it's a very murky law in some ways. So we would be working with you on that.
Right, and I would say that,
that's
yeah,
the tough one.
right, and I would say that in this case, it's the height standards, regardless of Measure A or just the zoning standard, is a zoning standard. So under state density bonus law, you can request that as a concession or a waiver. But the city council is going to be particularly sensitive to the height issue. And so there's going to have to be a pretty strong argument that, the 11-foot ceiling is going to make you go above the Measure A height limit. And there's going to be some pretty stringent looking at
Sure.
why that's needed. So.
Hey Sandy, if the density bonus allows you and everybody agreed to relax the zoning requirement to add the additional height, that I think is a separate issue from Measure A. Is it possible to use the density bonus go above the Measure A limit?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
and that's what I was just saying, is that,
It's
but that's gonna be
debatable.
particularly scrutinized, yeah.
In many projects that those approvals are going to come from planning commission. So the density bonus and the concessions and incentives are approved by the highest approving body for that project. So if you're doing a PD rezone or general plan amendment, which you wouldn't need to do for the particular incentives or concessions, that's part of the law too. But then it would go to council. Otherwise, it'd be planning commission, and then if it was appealed, it'd be council. So that's kind of how the approval would go. Any other questions or comments? Because I think we need to move on.
Just one question. What you've shown here is for Walnut Creek, but is the format pretty much the same, would apply to every city?
It would apply to every city. I mean, what I've talked about here really is the state density bonus law, which our local ordinance was mostly intended to just be consistent with that. We did offer the additional bonus for projects with deeper affordability, but outside of that, it was otherwise pretty consistent. So in areas where the state law has changed since our ordinance was adopted, we would go with the state law requirement. So I've focused on state law. So it would be applicable in any city. Now, a different city might have a staff person who would get up and talk about it and give a slightly different interpretation. I think my interpretation is pretty solid, but I also know it's like a big murky thing, so.
So this is really at the state level, not city, but as you're talking to people in Sacramento, Seattle has a program whereby if you do affordable, one of the benefits they'll offer you is a tax abatement, state tax abatement for a considerable period of time, 10 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We're thinking about.
Yeah, thank you.
So, observation from doing work in other cities is that, sometimes you run into planning staff and or planning commissions or city councils who have this expectation that affordable unit needs to look like one of the market rate units, when in reality, you really need to build something much smaller to make things work, so maybe it's a 600 or 800 square foot affordable type unit compared to a 1,200 square foot or higher market rate unit. So this kind of the expectation needs to be adjusted if anybody was to go into some sort of this program like this.
So I will say I actually don't recall off the top of my head what the requirements under density bonus law. I can tell you under our inclusionary ordinance, you are allowed to do a smaller unit. But in our inclusionary ordinance, it has to be equal. It has to have the same number of bedrooms as the other units. So if your project is all 2 and 3 bedroom units, your inclusionary units would also be an equal proportion of 2 and 3 bedroom. They can be smaller. They can have different finishes. There are certain incentives around that to make that more affordable. But we do require the same bedroom count. Under density bonus law, I can't recall if there's a bedroom count requirement. Okay, and I'm available. I'll bring out some cards, so if anybody has additional questions, you can always call me if you have something you want to talk through or if you want to ask me after.
Thank you, Margot.
So Margot mentioned through the course of her thorough presentation a lot of information there, but she mentioned partnering with affordable developers who have perhaps more expertise in the construction and maintenance, etc. Habitat for Humanity operates in that space, in that realm. I'd like to invite either Michelle or Hamid, I don't know who's giving the presentation, but Habitat is here in the room, and they'd like to give you a couple of slides on projects they've worked on here and otherwise other parts of the Bay Area. And without further ado, Michelle, Hamid, please come forward. Enlighten us.
Good morning, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, we can just take it out.
I'm Hamid Taib with the Habitat for Humanity and Brittany Michelle Troy, and we provide typically 100% affordable housing developments, and our mission is to provide decent homes and decent shelters for people. And we're one of the only ones that we know of that provide ownership affordable housing. Many folks provide rental, and that's not what we do. We provide ownership. So we go through a laborious process of talking and selecting future homeowners that, as Margot went through, and that they collectively in each household make a certain amount of income. And we provide homes to families or homeowners and collective partner families, as we call them, between 40 and 80% of AMI, which is area median income. In Contra Costa, area median income at the 100% level is around $94,000, and 80% of that is roughly about what Margaret mentioned, around 80, and 50,000, 50% is around 50,000, somewhere around there. That's the entire household. And we go through that process, and we kind of make sure they qualify for that, and we offer them a home that we set them up for success, so they don't ever have to leave if they don't want to leave. And they qualify. Once they qualify, they're done. They own it, and we don't have to go through more qualification every year. And we go through a process of 500 hours of sweating, we call sweat equity. Instead of them putting 5% down for purchasing their home, they're actually coming in with no money out of pocket except the closing costs, and we provide them the home. So for benefit of this group, we have looked at 3 possible cases, and one case we have built before in this town. One case we're under construction currently, and one case we're going to be building hopefully in Walnut Creek. And Michelle is going to walk us through those cases. And
okay. So I'm just going to go through some examples of developments that Cindy mentioned. So this is our Pleasant Creek Homes development, which we completed 3 years ago. It's a few minutes walk from here. It's right by the downtown Walnut Creek BART station. And this was 10 townhomes that we completed. And we actually used the city's local density bonus law that Margot had mentioned. So we exceeded the 35% state density bonus. We took advantage of the city's density bonus to exceed that. And so this area was actually in the M3 zone, which allowed us to build 7 homes on this site. So we asked for a 43% density increase, which got us to 10 homes. And we were able to do this because 80% of the homes were below 80% of AMI for this area. So we had 4 very low, 4 low, and 2 moderate income homes with this development. And as Margo mentioned, you can get the concessions when you use the density bonus law. And so for one of our concessions, we had to use it to exceed the 35% density bonus, and then the other one was for parking. And we think that providing 10 units as opposed to the 11 maximized financial resources and the leverage of around $1.5 million of loans and grants that the city provided us. And we were able to provide a broad range of affordable units by increasing the number of units we could provide here. So this is just kind of an idea of the type of funding that we get for our projects and how we're able to actually have our projects penciled. As you can see here, we have around 59-60% of government funding in order to build our projects. The rest of it is from and it does mention the land donation here, just to give you a little bit of background. I believe it's the redevelopment agency of the city that donated this property to us. It was previously owned by Caltrans, and then there was a adjacent parcel that was owned by a private landowner who we had talked to after we were able to acquire the city property, and we talked to them about this potential of providing affordable housing in this neighborhood, and they were really excited about it, and they actually donated the adjacent parcel. So we were able to coop up a site that was around 0.6 acres to build this project. So this is an example outside of the city. This is in Fremont. That's currently, we just broke ground like a couple months ago. So this is our first condominium project that our affiliate has done. So our affiliate is in Alameda, Contra Costa, and Santa Clara County. So this is really exciting for us because this is one of our relatively denser developments. So it's a 3-story condo project with tuck under garage, and this project is for 100% low income. So just to go through the funding sources again, this is interesting because as you can see up here, it says 13% from city/developer in lieu fees. In this case, the in lieu fees from a particular developer were directed towards our project through the city. So we were able to use their funds to provide these homes. And so from here, we have around 45% of our funding from various government sources. And let's see, down here, it shows that around 19% we hope to apply for the recently passed Measure A1 bond funds in Alameda County. So we expect that to be like an RFP to be released for that sometime maybe at the end of this year. So and then the remaining amount of funding for around 36% would be covered by habitat fundraising and also the home sales proceeds. So this is our last example. This is currently, we're going through the entitlement process right now. This is 42 townhouse style units by the Pleasant Hill BART station. And we've gone through a PRT and a pre-app process to solicit input from the commissioners, the city, and the community members. And we plan on submitting for planning approval sometime next month. So in this case as well, we've also used the city's local density bonus ordinance and to exceed the 35% state density bonus law. So we're asking for a 45% density bonus. And so this site is also in the M3 zone, which allows 1 unit per every 3,000 square foot. And so we're, yeah. And so, and we're able to exceed this 35% density bonus law because we're providing 75% of the homes to be for low income households. So here's just an idea of the funding sources again. So far we have 16% committed from the city of Walnut Creek, and we'll need an additional 23% of government funding to make up a total of around 40%. The rest will be covered by fundraising and home sales proceeds. For this project, we have relatively a higher percentage for home sales proceeds because we are providing around 10 moderate income homes, which can really bump up our sales proceeds. And then Henry's just gonna go through.
So as you heard from Michelle, so we use your development funding that is paid to city as in new housing. We use government funding, and we leverage that money that you pay to city for a new housing that is directed to us when they approve our project and when they go through the analysis, and we leverage it. In these 3 case studies that you heard Michelle that's the benefit of partnering private and public partnership, where the money can get leveraged so high. And we can also provide additional affordable homes and deeper affordability. So in case of 2 to 9 units, it will be one moderate. In case of 10 or over, as it stays now, the inclusion requirements requires 10% or 7% or 6% rent law, 10% or more. So we're here to invite you. You could do that in most cases as you go through the process, but building affordable homes within your development should be the first approach. How you can do that, because you bring in homes on the market. If they're for sale homes, that's what we do. It's good to be able to make the affordable homes within that development, if that is possible. Maybe the bottom line would not work for you, and we can see that. And maybe it's easier to write a check and pay the affordable housing in lieu fee. But there are ways, and we would like to be invited to the table to analyze your future project and see how we can use a density bonus. Let's say you have 100 units, and a density bonus will take you to 135 units, okay? And the inclusionary requirements may not be more than 35 units anyway, so you still end up with 100 market rate units. And we and you together, we will build that 35 units and offer that to public as affordable units. In a deeper side of it, maybe not all moderate, that you would probably have to do if you build them yourself. And maybe we do some of them very low in there. And so deeper affordability and increase the size. In case of 100 units, you would have provided 15% of 10% moderate, maybe 10 units affordable. Now in case of 135, we build 35 units of affordable units. So it's a win-win situation where the folks in the city would enjoy because it will be more affordable units. Your bottom line does not get hurt and maybe improve. And we get to a chance of providing more affordable homes to folks. And it is a win-win situation. And we help the problems of affordable housing now, the huge problem that we're facing right now. We help that. We help that by providing more affordable homes. So I invite you to think about that possibility. And when you look at your future project, think about the state density and think about us Habitat coming and partnering with you so we can do a private and a public partnership and provide more affordable homes. Any questions?
First of all, you guys do a great program. I have friends that work in it and been doing it for years and years. The question I have is, a number of years ago, maybe 7 years ago, the Habitat for Humanity was also taking existing dwellings and redoing them. And that program was quite active, and I don't know whatever happened to that program. And that's one question. And the second question is, I always see the funding, but I never see the construction cost or the total cost of a development. And is that public information? That the Las Juntas, I would love to see exactly what is the cost, the budget that you're going to do that entire project. Because the question is always, you're emphasizing new, but one of the greatest things is existing facilities that you could take that money and improve it and get more people to have housing. So,
great question. Great, and then Michelle can talk about that. The program still continues. We're still doing that. And everything we do is public information. And all our numbers are public. And you're welcome to see all of that. And CD has a lot of information can show you, and otherwise we can't. So you're welcome to see everything that we have.
Just speaking about the renovations program, so it is true, like a few years ago it was a lot easier to do that because of the foreclosure crisis. We were able to get a lot of homes at lower prices and then renovate them and then sell them to first-time home buyers. It is a little harder now because the market is a lot better and we're not able to acquire sites for as cheap as we were able to before, but we still do have a renovation program. We're actually doing some homes in Oakland right now, and so it really kind of depends on the area we're in because we're restricted by how much the homes actually cost for us to acquire them. But we do have a renovation program.
We're still going on there.
I mean, what happens to the proceeds when the owner sells?
Very good question. First of all, we go through a laborious setup of agreements with people. There's a lot of work to put these homes together. We'd like to keep them as affordable as long as we can. And so there's what we call a resale restriction. In the case of the last project that we looked at, that we're hoping to get approval on bill, and the resale restriction is about 65 years. So within that time period, if the family decides to move and decide to sell, first of all, we have the first right to buy them back. And when we buy them back at the then affordable price at that time. Let's say 10 years from now, they bought it for $150 and it's $175. So we buy it back at $175. And they have paid some monthly payment and they've incurred some equity. And so the equity goes back to them. And now we fix the home and give it to another family at that level. And the 65 years is source of it. Now, if we're not able to buy it back and the city is not able to take it back, they are able to sell it on open market. First, we require that they try to sell it to another affordable home owner. And if they go through that process, they cannot do that. They cannot find somebody. Then the last thing is to sell it on open market. And now when they do sell on open market, the revenue from the extra portion of that goes back to city as a first, because they help to fund that. So for more portion of all of that goes back to the city. And hopefully that money, then again, will be reinvested for affordable housing.
What about the situation when the household income significantly increased, after they own the properties? Did you guys check the income? Some situations the household income may above the regular income in this area after they move in 3 or 4 years later.
That is a great news for us. If the household actually increased their income, it's a great news. We like them to stay. We only check them once, and when they bought the house, we would like him to make more money, and so they can save money for the kids to go to college or improvement on their life. And so we actually set them up for success. It is a great news for us. If that happens, there continue to be affordable homeowners and living in their home. They own it just like anybody else. They own it, and they will continue. But if they decide to move, then the other program that we talked about will apply.
Even they no longer qualify as a low income.
We do not. We do not check. But if they do make more money, that's a great news for us. Any other questions? We're available here for more questions, and Margot can send you the PowerPoint. Thank you.
As is customary, we seem to be, I just figured out how to fix that. As is customary, we're ending a few minutes early, which I don't think anyone would complain about, but I want to highlight before you all scamper out of the room, again, we're going to have another forum next month, and At this point, we're looking at having the Contra Costa Fire Prevention District, County Fire, come by and talk to us about fire code updates. We may also have Frank Kong help us. The city recently, a couple months back in February, I believe, adopted some new standards and codes related to fire codes, fire issues. And so we're going to be having that as a point of discussion. For those in the room who may be wondering, we did have a cancellation last month. Last month's monthly forum was canceled. We had attended and had everyone committed from PG&E to attend. As you know, they had a tragedy strike them last month, and they canceled, understandably. And so we are working with them to reschedule. They may come in June or July. And so Jessica will do her best to keep everyone informed as to what the next month's schedule looks like. It's either PG&E or fire, pending. And then we also will be releasing shortly the latter half of the year, what we're going to be looking at in terms of topics. We have some interesting topics, including parking, among other things, to discuss. That concludes us for this month. Thank you for attending. If you have any questions for Hamid or for Margot, please feel free. They're in the back of the room. Thank you again for attending.